Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to our August monthly meeting. Looking forward to our presentation by Rich Weitzman on building model ships in different ways. I don't know whether he brought one for being in the bottle or not, but we kidded him about that. So one form of model shipbuilding. So go ahead. If those of you who have not been here before, we have a show and tell. You might notice this table at the front there that has several items on it, and we'll get to that towards the end of the non-presentation part of the meeting. And so if you had any, or if you think about it in the future, please bring things in for show and tell to demonstrate. So we'll get to that at a little bit later. We also, towards the end of the meeting, will have a raffle. And this time we have a $50 gift certificate from, they're all from Rockler, Joe, right? Yes. A $25 certificate, and I added another $20 certificate, which I won about 3 months ago, and I decided I would redonate it to the raffle. So there's a third raffle prize this time. So we'll be doing that again towards the end of it, okay? Any new members or visitors, please raise your hand and wait till the microphone gets to you to stand up and tell us a little bit about yourself, though. Any new members or visitors?
So I'm Dick Sawyer. I'm new. I joined last month, I believe. I've been to the safety class. Bill Schucott helped me build a workbench this past Saturday. Took his whole day to help me, and I really appreciate that. This seems like an awesome organization to me, and I'm really glad I joined. And I've known Tom for over 30 years. He coached my son when my son was real small, who's now 43 years old. So it was good to meet up with Tom again. And yeah, is that what you want to know?
You bet.
Who else?
Thank you. I happened to be a shop monitor last Saturday, so we got to introduce back then. So, okay.
Hello, my name is Bill Brome, and I worked with metal all my life as a jet mechanic at McDonnell Douglas. And I do wood projects at home, build little things, and I'd just like to learn more about it.
You're in the right place, so.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Fran Field. I was a visitor last meeting, and I joined the next day.
Good.
Took the safety class already and visited the shop a few times. And I've also got my son-in-law enrolled as a member now, and we're going to take a beginning class in December together. So he's only a kid. He's 39. So that's pretty much enjoy the organization so far. Thank you.
Welcome. Any others? Would a Madonna Waterman happen to be here? And would a Scott Van Mante happen to be here? Those are two individuals that I happened to talk to on the phone who expressed an interest. And I was going to at least mention with Madonna, Steve, our carver, usually sits over here. The lady happens to be a carver of gourd carver. And the reason I'm at least mentioning it is she is in an organization. They have about 60 members. About when we started, I think the guild had about 60 members to begin with. And they're going to have their annual show in June of next year. And they wanted to know whether the Woodworkers Guild might have some people that might want to sell items. If you make things like pens or whatever, and you'd like to have a market for selling them, a show would be a kind of place where you might do that. And therefore, we would get in touch with her about having reserving a booth. So I'll make sure that I get with Steve and so on, and other people as well then. So her husband is a turner, and so both of them expressed an interest in joining the guild, as did the other person I mentioned, Scott Van Mante, who has a gigantic new sawmill and so on that he has invested in some county that I didn't recognize. I'm from Illinois, so I don't know all the Missouri places as well. Okay, next. So upcoming classes, Bill Schucott, And there's some more slides then for him.
We have the picnic and tour coming up on September 9th. At the moment, there are only 14 people signed up. We're going to buy chicken for whoever signed up, so if you want chicken, please sign up. The picnic area is the one over by the carousel, just to the north of it, and we're going to have a tour of the historic buildings starting at 1 o'clock. Presentations coming up in September. There's going to be a discussion of furniture and related issues. October is St. Charles Historical Homes. November, we're going to have a presentation again by Quinn Saw Company. We're forming a training committee, and we certainly want input. In particular, I'd like to get some input about what classes do you guys want, particularly young members, new members. Give us some information of what they're looking for. You know, do you want to learn how to use a hand plane? Do you want to learn hand skills like cutting dovetails? Are you just more interested in using the power tools? And we have lots of classes where you can learn how to do that. We're also looking for teachers. We've got lots of skilled members of the guild, and we would like you to step forward for most any subject that you feel competent to teach, and I'll probably twist your arm so that you teach some that maybe you don't feel so confident, but you'll do fine. The classes that we offer fall into two general categories. There's skill building classes like the joinery, dovetails, and there are project classes like building a drawer, building a nightstand, building one of these tables that we're donating to Home Sweet Home. So there are lots of opportunities. In particular, to my knowledge, we've never had a class on using a hand scraper. And I've used one, but it's been a long time ago, and I'd like to find somebody who uses one on a regular basis who can really show us. It might not be a 3 or 4 hour class, but how to sharpen them and how to use them. Everything you read and find in woodworking talk like, you know, it's the right way to do it as opposed to sandpaper, but I haven't heard much talk about that in the guild. Upcoming classes in the remainder of August, we've got another ongoing fundamentals class. September, we have several classes. September 10, there's another fundamentals class. 17, we've got a shorty class on drill press. 24th is another fundamentals class. And on September 30, Mike Stoll is going to teach a class on building a Moxon vise. So if you like to do handwork, that's something you might be very interested in.
Excuse me, what's involved in the fundamentals classes?
Oh, come see me afterwards. A bunch of things. We build 2 projects. We teach hand-cut dovetails, hand-cut half-blind dovetails, mortise and tenon, dados, rabbets. If you take the fundamentals class, you're going to have enough skill that you can turn around on your own and build furniture. October, Brad is going to teach a class on a veneered jewelry box. That's a 2-day class. On the 15th, we have another shorty class that Brad is going to teach on the new CBN lathe tool sharpening system. Another fundamentals class. The fundamentals class is a series of 10 classes. The first 5 classes are every 2 weeks, and the last 5 classes are every 4 weeks. It's a more complicated project. October 29, we've got a class coming up on cutting boards. November, Mike Stoll is going to teach a hand tool appliances for planing, like a shooting board and some of the accessories to make your hand plane perform. and another fundamentals class. December, what do we got? Another version of the beginners class, which is a prerequisite to the fundamentals class. What we do in the beginners class is particularly for people who don't have experience with the power tools in our shop. We've had some of those jump right into fundamentals before, and they're always a little hesitant to jump right in, as you should be, because you can get hurt. So now we have a 1-day, 8-hour class to give you some exposure to the power tools. And this is something new. We received a request from a neighborhood association down on the east end of the hill, and they have these signs. It's the Southwest Garden Neighborhood. They have 5 of these signs, and we're going to refurbish those signs. One of the signs is in such bad condition that we're going to actually make a new sign. But they all say the same thing. They're not all the same size. We're going to take the sign off the posts. The posts are all in there rock solid, and we're going to leave those alone. Besides a bunch of 70-year-old guys digging post holes is not what I call woodworking. And we're going to have a meeting this Saturday at 10:30 at the shop, if you're interested at all. We're not going to start working. It's really organizational to see how many people show up and figure out what the tasks are. I mean, the first thing we got to do is some guys have got to go down and take these signs off the posts, put them in a pickup truck, and bring them back to the shop. And it's in a part of town where there are more one-way streets than I can count, and I've gotten good and lost trying to find these signs. But we actually have a member who lives down there and has volunteered to help trek around, because he'll know how to get past the one-way streets and get to each of the signs. I went with Fran Field on Tuesday because I'd seen 4 of the 5 signs, and I carefully made a map and took us to a sign I'd already seen, and I still don't know where the 5th sign is. Why are we on and off, guys? Driving me nuts. So the first task is to go down and get the signs. Then we need to buy materials to replace one of the signs. I've ordered some stencils so we can replicate the 5-inch letters. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that we're going to figure out how many people are interested in helping and divvy up the tasks. It should be a simple, a not complex project. We're not going to build a highboy. So that's all I've got.
And for those of you who don't know, after our visit to Kansas City, we talked a lot about what we learned there, but one of them is they have earned a lot of their money that has allowed them to grow from a guild our size to about 900 members and a 12,000 square foot shop by accepting contracts from the community and so on, and actually being paid with the proceeds going to the guild. So this will be our first foray into that area. We've consulted lawyers about our non-profit status and so on, and we feel comfortable, especially patterning after what Kansas City has done and so on, that this will be not a problem. So this will be our first foray into that. So again, the profits from this will go straight back into the coffers of the guild, though.
Now, I'm not a gambling man, but I'll gamble that we're not making enough revenue to buy a new shop.
Right. So our presenter this evening is going to be Rich Weitzman, but he is also the head of our toy program. So he might just stand up and give us an update on the status of our toy program in terms of the number of models and toys we've been able to donate and so on.
All right, this month we have gathered tonight 200, let's see, no. Yeah, 240, no, this is, I'm sorry. I didn't write what I'm reading, just the numbers. We are going to take home tonight, the people brought 312 toys. And we have toys going out this month of 245. And 2 months ago, someone brought and put on the table for the toys little parts like this of some toys. And I don't know who they came from or what they're exactly for. So if anyone has any idea, let me know what's going on with them. Thank you.
Okay, Christmas toy program, Wayne, and if you want to say something about the Christmas festival. There. Now.
We're building Christmas toys first and third Friday of every month. Come on out if you want to help out on Christmas toys. The Festival of Trees, we're collecting items for that. That's an annual thing that Shriners do here. It raises money for their various charitable things. And we'd like to see some very nice toys, wooden bowls, salt and pepper shakers, anything you'd like to make out of wood, put underneath the tree. If I remember right, on YouTube, there is a short video of what we had under the tree for last year, so you can check that out. And we need to thank St. Charles Hardwoods for donating race car blanks. For those of you that have been around for a while, we build a lot of little race cars like this that go out to be decorated by the kids, paint them up for Christmas distribution, that type of thing. St. Charles Hardwood donated in excess of 200 of these milled blanks, each one of them 4 feet long or longer, and enough for at least another 6,000 cars. So our appreciation to St. Charles Hardwoods for what they did.
Tom Turney, the Home Sweet Home program.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Just real quickly, the program's ongoing for the new members. The best way to find out is to go on our website under Community Service and look for the Home Sweet Home. It tells you all about the program. I do have wood in the back of my pickup if anybody's interested in picking some wood up today or tonight. And I think we'll be up to 45 tables by Friday's donation. So we're doing well for this year. Our goal is 100 tables for our fiscal year, which ends in March. So we've got a good start, and we just need to continue to build tables. So if you want to get involved, please do. And thanks to the people that have already built tables. And if you have any questions, please see me after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, and lastly, the St. Louis Astronomical. I don't know what's happening with the feed coming on and off, but St. Louis Astronomical Society, they have a wonderful program where they pair up with the many libraries in the metropolitan St. Louis area to provide telescopes. The telescopes have bases, wooden bases, or actually particle wood bases to begin with, and so on. This is Don Ficken, or whatever is his name, and he's a coordinator of that program. It's not uncommon, like we just saw tonight, that things get dropped. And sometimes this telescope and bases together get dropped, and the bases made out of particle board have shattered or broken. So I met with him one day, and we talked about, could we provide wooden substitutes for those bases that have dropped. If they had to go buy them back from the company they got the bases from, it takes several months just with the ability to get them, besides it costing a lot of extra money, and they would still be particle board. So this is Don, and last Saturday when I was there as a shop monitor, I was able to give them finished products for 3 of those 4 parts. The other part has never been broken, so we weren't too worried about that. 13 each. And I'd like to recognize Paul Deutsch, if you would stand up. So he built all of these parts the full size. And I'd like to recognize Don Turner. Please stand up. He's our CNC expert who provided all of the patterns that were utilized with utilizing CNC and so on. So I feel very comfortable that right now we will not really need to do any more parts for quite a while, because they haven't had any more breaks since May, and the one part that have been broken most recently, there were 3 of those, so we'd have 13 of each. So I think we're pretty well set. So I'm happy that we did it. Don was very happy with the result and so on. So thank you all who volunteered. Okay, carving tools to sell. Again, if you were here at the last meeting, a lady brought in some carving tools that were left over when her father, I think, died. And several of you came up at the meeting last time, and Steve, Santa Claus, had very nicely looked into each of the things that were in that box and put numbers on them after looking at eBay and stuff like that, and put a very realistic price on the different items. The one thing that I would like to bring to people's attention is there is what's the name of the company again? Fordham. Power carver thing. Steve's did check it, and it does work and so on. Even an eBay price was like $240, and the price that he put on that is only $80 or $85 or something like that. So if anybody has any interest in at least considering looking into power carving, which it seems like that's what this guy did most of, I have it here, and I'll spread out. There's only a couple more things and so on that if you have an interest after the meeting is done today. Some of you picked up some things last meeting. I had 10 different things going on at the end of the meeting. So, and I wasn't able to say, I'll take your money. So I said, I'll trust you. So if you were one of those people and didn't put your money in for the tools that you bought and so on, let me know. I'll be around at the end of this meeting then too. Okay, survey. I am so proud that we had such a good outpouring of responses to the survey. Todd, could you give us at least some of those numbers and so on?
Yeah, so we had 136 responses total out of many others, but that's still not a bad number. It was good enough number for us to be able to make an assessment and gather enough information that we were looking for. So overall, the survey, the open rate of the survey was over 60%. That doesn't sound great, but that is much higher than the average survey response. So kudos to the group that did that. So out of the 136 respondents, I took a lot of that data and I just made some general assessments and tried to gather a little bit of trends. And what we found was that 66% of those folks that joined really joined for the classes and to learn skills, right? So we kind of knew that. Another positive trend is 21% of you want to be more involved in the Guild, which is an excellent thing that Jay was really glad to see. We're looking to find new ways to get folks opportunities to volunteer, and we're doing that now, and we're working through a lot of those opportunities that Bill talked about earlier, and that I'm working on from the IT perspective and getting Doug some help. So that's really great that we're getting more and more people involved. 14% of the respondents are already shop monitors. That's pretty good. Being a shop monitor has some fringe benefits, and David can talk to you about that. But a lot of the folks are more interested in furniture building, about 66%. And let's see, some of the more higher level. A fair price. I think you remember one of those questions. What's a fair price for a class? We had about 40% of the folks feel like $75 to $100 for a class is a fair price. And about 25% feel like about $50 to $75 is a fair price. So again, depending on the classes, our classes are much lower than that and much more affordable. So that's a good trend to know. One of the things that I learned, and we talked about last month, was the summer skill builder concept, right? Where we were trying to gather some information on what is your interest in attending a much more condensed class, couple hours, maybe during the week through the summertime. And what we learned was not too many people were all that interested in it. So guess what? We heard you, and we're not going to pursue that at this point, right? But what we will do is we felt like folks are still interested in maybe having open shop hours during the week, during the summertime when it's light out longer. So a lot of that feedback, all that came through the survey, is really, really helping us. Both good news and bad news. You know, we want to know more about it. Like Bill said, we want to know what are your interests? What kind of classes do you want to take? So those are some of the trends that we kind of gleaned from the survey. And I think that in general, we have learned what we needed to learn, and we really appreciate you giving us that feedback. It was really, really helpful for us. So I really appreciate it, and I think the Guild board also appreciates all your input. It really helps us out.
Thank you, Todd. So we will be further digesting information we got back from the survey, and you'll be notified and so on about more final results and kind of a plan for taking those things into account as we plan the future of the Guild. Okay? Okay, you should be somewhat familiar with the proposed bylaws, Guild bylaws revisions, and it's required by our bylaws that if we think about revising those bylaws, we need to present them to you the month before, the month meeting before we vote, and then again at the meeting that we're going to vote. We also put it in the newsletter both a month ago and again now. And so just go back to the first one again. So here they are again. So in section 4, you don't have the whole thing in front of you to look at, but you should have been able to look at it in between if you wanted to take the time to do that. It says something about 25% of the members of the Guild shall constitute a quorum. And this is talking about when we have our our April meeting where we vote on officers and so on. Well, if you look at 25% of 330 members or whatever, there is no way that we're ever going to have that many people here at the meeting to be able to satisfy that. So we're just going to delete the 25% of the members shall constitute a quorum, and basically it's going to be whoever's at the meeting and so on, just like tonight. There are a couple of typos in that next one that are not a big deal, just a couple things crossed out. And then additions. Upon receipt of membership dues and completion of workshop safety class, members will have full privilege to use the woodworking shop during open shop hours. All members have the responsibility to be aware of their surroundings and the inherent risk while in around woodworking shop. If a member appears to be not to be able to adhere to or not attentive to safe tool usage, the member may either have their privileges restricted to hand tools usage, or the member may be permanently banned from shop tool usage. The reason for this recommendation is that we actually had this come up once, and it was a difficult process to kind of go through and determine what to do because we didn't have anything in the bylaws that really addressed this. And then in section 10, the woodworking shop is equipped for conducting educational and teaching classes for members and members' personal usage. Members' personal usage does not extend to allowing the woodworking shop to be used to support any member's business use. And that's actually straight out of the Kansas City bylaws as well. The purpose of the shop is not to have you conduct a business and use the equipment and so on to do that. So, and then again, the quorum thing is also present in Article number 9, and we're again just going to delete "and a quorum is present." Okay, anybody have any questions about those proposed revisions of our bylaws? If not, I'm going to ask for a vote, and everybody just raise their hand if they're favorable to these bylaw revisions. That's what I figured. Okay, so we have a new group of people working on the website. And on the website, that's where you can see the bylaws, and they're going to be redoing the bylaws and incorporating these revisions and so on. So that's where they'll be. So thank you. So let's go ahead and do show and tell. So those of you who have put show and tell items, come up and form a line at the end of the table.
I'm Brad Bernhard, and I brought these marquetry pieces in. I've been on a several-month journey of trying to learn the creative art of doing marquetry, self-taught with some books as references. I started off with commercial veneer, which I found some difficulties with using. I have recently switched to using shop sawn veneer. I collected a number of domestic and exotic woods and bought a drum sander. And so my pieces that I brought in here tonight, the subject matter that I've been interested in has been nature. In particular, I've kind of focused on birds lately. These pieces of veneer are like a puzzle where you're cutting a insert piece that comes in from below at a bevel. That's called double bevel marquetry technique, and the shop sawn veneers are about 1/16 of an inch. So the final thickness of these pieces with the backer is 1/2 inch. I've covered them with shellac. Bill had asked about using a card scraper, and actually I level these pieces once I put them to the Baltic birch background or the substrate. I usually use a card scraper to level them. One of the big reasons for that is sanding. When you're using light and dark colors, especially the exotic woods, will smear woods like ebony and some of the other exotic woods into woods that are very light colored like holly, and you can have a mess. So a card scraper is a perfect tool. I guess I'm saying I could be considered a volunteer if you need somebody to do that card scraper class. But anyhow, it's been a fun journey that I've been on. I kind of switch gears with the types of woodworking I do every, 6 months to a year. And this is something I really enjoy, the artistry of this, because it's like painting with wood. So if anybody has any questions, or if somebody wants to bend my ear in the future, and if any of you out there are interested in marquetry, I'd love to talk about it. So,
Hold them out.
oh, sorry. And one other thing, and I'll hold these up. So 3 of these pieces, so where I get these images, 3 of the pieces were marquetry pieces that somebody I found online had done, and the other 3 are pictures that I will put them on a computer screen and use transfer paper, and then I will decide what in my catalog of veneers, it took me about a month to collect and make, and I've got several hundred, what colors I have, and then sometimes I will create the branch or the leaves or other aspects. But that's kind of I found a very cool way. There's endless material you can find. You could even take your own pictures on your cell phone and change the magnification of images that you load onto your computer. So this is a blue heron piece. This is a flowering tree with a bee landing. This was a picture that I added a branch to. This is a yellow finch. This is a waxwing cedar bird. I believe this one is a sparrow in flight. That one I'm not 100% sure. A swallow? And the last one, and this one I think I have even more detail than I've put in these others. So this is a piece I just finished, is a Carolina wren. So anyhow, if anybody has any questions, probably in a hurry, but you can grab me later. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
I'm Keith Lassant. For several years, for nieces and nephews, and now grandnephew. When they turn about 2 years old, I've been making a stool for them that their name letters drop into the The top of this was, I bought a piece of oak step material. This is actually built up, laminated up material. I can't get the solid oak anymore in the sizes conveniently. But so then I cut through one layer of it with the scroll saw, and then glued the bottom piece on and turned the legs and put them into the bottom piece.
Hi, my name's Ken Smith. Daughters and granddaughters get jewelry boxes, so this is the last one for one of my granddaughters. This is out of an old wood magazine, and it called for maple and wenge. I went ahead and used walnut, just easier to work with, and put her initials in there, Alexia Marie. That's what I call her AM. So that's about it. I need to work on inlay so I can get that inlaid, and I need to work on the flocking because it's a little thin in some places here, but granddaughters fortunately don't really care. So, thank you.
I made a box several years ago to hold my dominoes and cribbage board, but I used a conventional hinge, and I've started making wooden hinges. I think it makes a much prettier, gives you a much prettier result. And you don't have to buy the hinge or mortise it, you just have to make the wooden hinge. And the other thing I wanted to show everybody was a real simple project that if you're using peel and stick sandpaper, this makes it real easy to change and keep track of. All it takes is a piece of scrap wood and some 3/8 dowels and a drill press. So take a look at it. It's clever, and it's really handy because they're a pain to get on straight. So, and you can separate the different grits. And it also lands right on the holes every time. Anyhow, thank you.
Okay, tonight's program, Rich Weitzman, who, if you don't know, I think is the only charter member of this guild. So he's been a member of the guild since it was formed about 40 years ago. And he is been chair of the toy program, among many other things. So he's been very active for over 40 years in this guild. So he's going to talk tonight about building ships out of wood to begin with, And as an example, whether you do them in the form of getting a kit to do, or whether you get them from plans and so on. So we look forward to the presentation. Thanks. Rich?
For what it was just said, the guild started in the back of the shop at the Wooden Shop store before 1984. And I was one of those gentlemen that used to go up and talk to Bruce about woodworking, and there were about 8 of us. And that's how this guild became what it is today. So with the exception of a couple years taking care of my mother, I've been to every meeting, and for the first 20 years of the guild, I never missed a board meeting or a regular meeting. Just happened that I was out of town on other weeks. But I started doing woodworking in my basement as a kid with a handsaw. And my grandfather gave me a jigsaw that he had. And so I started doing little things, little carvings and different things. And then one year I got a catalog in the mail, and I thought I brought it with me, but I couldn't find it in the car when I got here. But it was a lobster catch, a small rowing sailboat that was used to set the lobster traps. And I ordered it, and I put that model together, and it was plank on frame. This is a solid hull, which is this one right here. And I do have a couple solid hulls. One I'm working on, it was my father's ship in World War II. This is one I got years ago at a model car show that the local ship model club was in. And it cost me $8, and it's probably worth quite a bit because it's very old. This is a plank on frame, which is this one right here. This one was a privateer. It's the rattlesnake, which is this one right here. And this one you can also buy the plans separately. And but now the biggest thing is when you're making a ship, you can do it from a kit, or you can take the same plans that you would with a kit and build it from scratch. This is a different hull, but it's still plank on frame. And this one has the hot top plank already put on here. This one I acquired from in an auction. I've never done anything with it. That's upside down at the moment. It shows the plank that's already on there. That ship model is of the Enterprise, which I do have one that's semi-completed, and I think I left it in the car or at home, I'm not sure which. This one is a city class U.S. boat, ironclad, that was built by a group of builders that is going either in or going into the Civil War Museum in Jefferson Barracks. And this shows you the difference. These are kits, and you can do the same thing on the plank and frame as I did here. This is built the way a real ship was built, with timbers. And I have the plans for, which is built from the plans of a ship called the Cairo, which was, all of them were built on the riverfront downtown or south of the city. by Eads. And I have a set of those plans, and I also made a miniature sample of it, but I've never gotten any further than the hull. But they're still working on it. I think they've been working on this for 6 years. And yeah, go ahead.
How big is that boat?
I did have the figures on that. I want to say it's about 20 feet, not 20 feet. I don't remember offhand. I did have the statistics on it, but it's, I wish I would have put that down. I would guess the beam is probably, looks like it's maybe about 2 feet, somewhere between 2 to 4 feet, and probably about 20 or 30, not feet. I'm sorry, I'm thinking wrong here. Probably about maybe 20 inches by maybe about 2 feet long. But that's something I wasn't involved in building. I just happened to grab that because it does have the timber frame on it. This is the way the framing is done on a ship. And yes, it's upside down, but I didn't switch it on my computer, on my printer. And that's one reason why it's that way. The other reason is a lot of ships were built upside down. Because they start on the top, which at this point is the bottom, and you work your way up. Other ones were, and the larger they got, the less likely they were to build it in that method. See, I put both of them in wrong. That shows the above the deck, this section right in here. That's one I built. It's of the Robert E. Lee. And it was a kit that's no longer available. But as you can see, there's a little bit of damage to it right now. I had some people clearing out my basement when my main broke for the kitchen. And it's in a case that I didn't want to move it for fear that something else would come loose. It also takes up quite a bit of room. But that one is a kit also. This one is the blue nose. This one is also plank and frame. And when I took that to a show, a friend of mine, Howie Smith, told me, he looked at it, he said, "There's something wrong with that." I said, "What?" "The water line is supposed to be straight. I had it curved." And I never noticed it, but he did. And I still never did put the new white line in there. And, yes?
How many hours are we talking about for each of these ships?
Well, I was going to get into that, but
Okay.
It depends on the ship, but doing the planking probably takes about 20 to 30 hours. The rigging, I haven't rigged this one yet, but the rigging would take another maybe 20 hours, depending on the ship and the size of it. As I said, the one they're doing for the Civil War Museum, that one is quite a bit bigger, and I've been working on it for, I think, 4 to 6 years, somewhere in that range.
I've been working on the USS Constitution with all the rigging,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going into my 52nd year.
Yeah.
It's not a priority project.
No. And a lot depends how it's built. There's a lot of different things that make a big difference on it. This is the one I'm working on was working on for my father, who's deceased now. That's the USS Haverfield, the destroyer escort. And when I picked that up to try to bring in here, some of the parts started falling off. So I've got to, before I move that or finish it, I've got to repair it. But this one is from plans, and that was hard to get. Matter of fact, the Cairo was worse. Trying to buy plans of a certain ship is hard. I contacted for the Cairo, or any of the ironclad gunboats. I contacted the Department of the Navy, and they didn't have anything. I was told the Department of the Interior had them, because they own one of the ones that was brought up, the Cairo. And I wrote the office in Denver I was given the address to, and they said, we have no such ship. Finally, I went up to Mark Twain Hobby and I talked to the owner, Dennis, and he said, I got it in the back office. You like to go make copies? So this one I did find. My dad was a member of the Destroyer Escort Society, and we went to one of their reunions, and I was talking to one of the members, and he said, you're looking for pictures and the plans? He says, let me get you the address. So that makes it a little easier, because sometimes they're hard to come by. And I had 20 plans that I had bought, and when those guys were cleaning out the basement, they threw those out. And some of them are irreplaceable, unfortunately. One of them isn't, and I am going to reorder that finally. The thing is, if you're going to do a kit, it can be fairly quick if you follow the directions. And now the advantage of a solid hull is you're partway there, but I've yet to see, with the exception of this one, and of course it was someone else bought it originally, the one problem with these are they come rough, like a lot of carvings do. And this one has been worked over somewhat. The plank on frame, which these two is a sample of, this one I got in an auction at the St. Louis Admirals, which as I understand is no longer in operation. And this was a lady that contacted a friend of mine, Tom Odell, and he was radio controlled in boats only. And she had this one, and it's the Massachusetts Privateer. It's Rattlesnake. And she had it, and I went up to talk to her. I called her and went over there, and she had this, and she had the box there and the plans, and she said, okay, you want to take it home with you? I says, what do you want? She says, nothing, just get it out of my sight. Her husband had been building this, and he passed away. And she had two of them that were finished. Those didn't bother her. But seeing this sitting on his bench was a little more than she wanted, and I understood that. So I took it home. It's been a while, but I'm going to one of these days do this. But the gentleman that had this built this one so far. And this is laser cut frames. This one, this one's made out of plywood, the frames, and they were probably pressed or maybe cut. I don't know. I didn't ever see the kit, the forms in there. Now then, this is one that one of the guild members gave me, and Jerry Cohen, and he was not having too good a luck, and I've kind of repaired what I can. But this one is one that I'm going to finish one of these days. But the hardest part is doing the planking. And it doesn't matter if you do it on a finished hull, or not, I shouldn't say, a solid hull, or a frame hull. You still have to put the planks on. and that's the planking. And the thing is, when you do this, the planks, as you go down, I use two different colors. As you go down further, you get a little gap like that. So what you have to do is you have to cut, because you're on a curve, that gap is not because they're not they're not close enough together. The gap is because when you bend a piece, that's what opens that gap. So you have to cut the pieces to fit, or you have to you have to cut them in smaller pieces, which is a real pain. And when you buy the kit, the advantage of the kit is you buy a lumber yard in a box. All the pieces, your sail pieces, all the rigging, and everything else comes in the kit. And one thing you want to do when you buy a kit like this is, it's kind of annoying to do, but make sure you have everything. Because a lot of the companies that make these will replace the materials as you go along. And they do include booklets that show all the different steps. And one thing the books a lot of times say in the first paragraph is read all the instructions first. That may not be as important as they claim, but read at least the section fully that you're working on. Because you can, on these kits, a lot of times you'll do step 1, you'll do step 2, you get down to step 12 and it says, before you do step 12. And if you would have known that on step 5, you would have been a lot better off.
Yeah, see why it took you 52 years.
That's
a lot of stuff.
There are a lot of steps, and it depends on how often you work on it. I knew a gentleman, Dr. Garland Smith. He was a surgeon. He built some of the most beautiful ship models, and he did the interiors as well. Even though you can't see them, he knew they were there. And he took hour upon hour to do those. And he was the only person I ever saw that had a shop that was carpeted in the basement. And he had all his models in the living room, in cases, and the dining room. And his wife was willing to let him do that. Of course, they were basically pieces of furniture, the way he built them. But he had a beautiful collection of them. And it's a fun hobby. It's the one thing I do, and I meant to bring some clamps and I didn't do it, but when you put the planking on here, I never noticed how much extra glue he put on here. Anyway, there's two ways you can put the planks on across here. One is you can pin them, you can nail them, but the finished hull is a little nicer to not have that on there. So what I normally do is I will take some super glue and a glue called Weld Bond. And the first one, of course, you just fit and glue. So I put the first one on, and I use the Weld Bond on the final coat. By the way, on most of these, both of these have 2 layers of planking. One is, I believe on this one it was just basswood. On that one it was in a less expensive wood. And then you put the walnut or whatever on top. Now, of course, if you're painting it, you don't have to worry about the walnut. So, but it's, and of course, one thing I did learn building models was that the Robert E. Lee that I had on the screen a little bit ago, that was a kit from Scientific Models, I believe was the manufacturer. And I assembled it. I put it in a plastic case, which was in the picture. And I took it out, and the same gentleman told me about the water line on my sailing vessel. He was sitting there, and I kept wondering why he was looking so hard at my Robert E. Lee. And finally, I said, Howie, why are you looking so close to that? He says, do you know all your fittings are powder? They were white metal, and they had all disintegrated from being sealed. So you have to be careful on if you're going to put something in a case, what type of metal the fittings are made from. Britannia works well. The Robert E. Lee I replaced with all, I used made molds of the originals that I bought new pieces. I molded those out of a resin product and made replacements for them. Those haven't disintegrated, and I know they won't. And the limit to the models you can get or the plans you can get and the price too. I mean, the small rowing or sailing boat, lobster boats, they start at about $20. For some of the bigger ones, I think the Blue Nose right now is going for around $300-400, and they can go. There's some that are $5,000-6,000. So it varies, and of course the company, you have to be careful what materials are in the kit. Now the other thing is when you go from static models to something radio controlled, don't try one of these, because it's just no way to have access to them. Not that it hasn't been done, if they're big enough. And all these, the Blue Nose does have a stand, but I don't know where it is at the moment. So I may have to make a new one, but a stand is a big help. And when you build one like this, there are clamp vices that will hold the ship like this, and you can move them. And so I've built a few of these. I've got a few more that I want to build, and I want to do more of them from scratch, because then you can build, if you can find the plans, you can build a lot of different types. Materials, sometimes that's a problem with the kits. There are some kits in the past that were they were balsa wood kits, which were fine if you were going to make a radio controlled boat. But balsa wood for a static model, if you handle them much, you don't want them to be fiberglass. So, and then when you're doing this, of course, there's a lot of items that have to be added to the model. The structure for the decking and the belaying pins, which are a pain if you lose them. And it looks like I've lost a couple of them. But this one I built a number of years ago, and as I said, I still have the Cairo, which will be not as big as the one that they built for the Jefferson Barracks Museum, but I do have plans to build that. And after seeing them do that one, I'm not sure I won't increase the scale and do it with beams instead of a hull. I do have a solid hull that I made, which one advantage of the solid hull over the plank and frame is if you're building from scratch, the frames take a bit of mathematics to lay out. And then, of course, when you get to that point, that is the other thing, is all these have to be curved, the edges. So the planks, because if these are flat, you're going to see those flats in the planking. So there's a lot to it. And of course, another advantage of the kits, or you can buy them, but is the dowels come with it. The only problem are the dowels are dowel rods, not masts. So if you have a small lathe, it helps. Otherwise, one way to do the masts is you put them in an electric cordless drill, turn it at a low speed, get a piece of sandpaper, and be very careful not to break it, and be careful not to misshape it, which is not easy. I see my top mast is a little off. And finishing, it depends on what type of model you make, whether or not you want them painted, and also to some extent what the original ship was. The Blue Nose and the Blue Nose 2 are both painted. Blue Nose 2 is a reproduction of the original up in Canada, which would someday be interesting to work on, one of those. And I've done a few. I want to do some more. I've done a few. I do both plastic and wood models, mainly because there was a museum in St. Charles. I don't know if anyone's been there, called Miniature World, that was on Main Street, and I was a sales manager. That's how I got back into plastic models, which I was talking to the gentleman at Mark Twain Hobby the other day. I can't seem to find any, up until last night, I couldn't find contact of anyone that was with the Gateway Model Ship Crafters Club. So I did find one of the members that I knew. I used to be part of that club until both I and my mother were sick for a while. And so I'm looking into finding them. If I can't find them, I may look into trying to start another ship model club here in St. Louis, because it's kind of nice to get together and talk. And I know Bob is doing it in his basement for you know Bob?
No.
Okay. I'm trying to see if I can
Join your club.
Okay, well, one way or the other, I'm going to find out within the next week.
Okay.
If he's still around, if not, I'm going to start another. So if anyone is interested in a club, let me know and I'll keep in contact with you. And because I missed the two clubs, and the Admirals is gone. I know that because I've talked to a couple of people, including Mark Twain, that told me it was gone. But Dennis made a suggestion: if we do start another club, don't limit it to wood. Also do plastic, static, the ones that are basically building the same as this. So that's what I'm going to look into on those. And the other thing I've always wanted to do, we had a couple of years ago, we had a group that brought a boat they built in here. I want to build one of them full size, not a sailboat, but I'd like to build a small size boat, which is a good point to bring up. On the Blue Nose, there are some little, what some people might call ships, but little rowing vessel, boats. How do you tell a boat from a ship? If the boat can go on, if something go on a ship, it's a boat. Ships cannot go on another ship unless it's a dry dock. So are there any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been writing them down. How do you determine the scale of the ships that you want to build? Is it just your interpretation of what you want to build, or?
Well, if you buy a kit, they come in a certain scale. If you build from scratch,
Yes.
the ship is there's three ways of determining what size you're going to build. One is if you buy plans that are designed for a ship model, you can go by that scale. If not, you can, like the Haverfield that I built, that was built on my dad's scale. Originally he said, let's have something about a foot long. And I cut out a hull and I shaped it and I showed it to my dad. He says, no, bigger. So it went from about here to here. So what you have to do is, first of all, if you're going to use plans, get the plans. Find out what scale they're in, and then you decide by either location you're going to put it, what size you feel comfortable about, what'll fit on your bench, whatever size, you go ahead and you take that drawing and scale it to what you want. And it's a lot of variance. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I know there's been other people who want to ask questions. I'm only going to ask a couple. But I saw that the planks were pretty limber already that you pulled out of the box there. Do you ever have to steam them at all in order to get them to fit? And does that depend upon the species of wood that you're using?
It depends upon the species of wood, depends on the thickness, and it depends upon, a lot of times it does, even with those very fine pieces, but if I've got one in here and it figures this kit doesn't have one, but there are pieces that go on to ship models that are heavier. Then they need to be soaked or steamed, and even the thin ones, it kind of helps to soak them a little bit. But it's let's see, I don't know how I want to put this. The plank size depends a lot on the ship. The Haverfield, if that wasn't steel, I'm going to just paint it. I'm not going to put planking on it. But if I was doing that, I would have taken the information from the plans for the ship and found what the ship's planks were, the steel hull, and used that, even if it was wood and wanted to make it look like steel. That's what I would do, and I'd use that dimension to make the hull. That's what I will do on the Cairo also.
Okay.
Is I will determine it by what it would have been on the ship, and then to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just curious about the typical costs of the kits.
Kits, from when I started, they were cheap. I wish I would have bought every one I could have bought, because I could make a bit of money now on some of them. But I think when I bought the Blue Nose, that one was about $150. I think it's about $300 now. But as I said, a small rowing or sailing vessel, those will go from $20 to $100. Sailing vessels, the Blue Nose, something like that would start around $300. And if you get some of them like the Warsaw, or some old Ironside or some of those, they can be a couple $1,000s in that range, depending on the kit, the type of materials, the type of fittings. So there's a wide range.
Now, obviously, the adhesives you use on those are not the same ones we would use on our regular woodworking. Is it more of a cyanoacrylic type glue for something that dries quick, or are you using like little itty bitty amounts of like Tite Bond, or how are you gluing those together?
I use a product called Weld Bond. Ace Hardware handles it. I don't know if anyone else is or not. I used to sell it, and I stopped when my father got sick, and I've never picked it back up, but it's a product made by Frank T. Ross Company in Canada. And it's very similar to Tite Bond. The only difference is it can be used for anything from a piece of wood to sealing concrete if you thin it down. And I've taken a block of wood and put that on the back and stuck it to a foundation wall and held it there for a couple minutes and let it set. Put a soap dispenser on the wall with it, and it's been on there for 30 years. So it's very strong, but I use that partly for that strength, but partly because it will work with a super glue type acrylic, and I use that sometimes as a clamp. But the advantage to it is when I'm doing the deck fittings, I can take these little structures, put that glue on there, make sure this is set level, set it down on the deck, and hold it for a minute or so, let it go. The next morning it's solid. It does not move or anything else. So that's why I use Weld Bond. But there are special glues for wood. Airplane glue will work on it. Tite Bond will work on it. The biggest problem is you don't want something too watery to do the hull, do the planking, which is why I like Weld Bond. It's a little bit thicker. But there's a lot of different glues that will work. And it's from the people I've known doing models, basically it's preference of what you're used to. And these ways, if you want to try Tite Bond on something, if you haven't done it before, before you do a plank, get 2 pieces of wood, small scrap pieces, and get a plank and try the glue. Because one problem with some of the glues, and I know Elmer's works fine, the carpenter's glue, but I've used some in the past that I don't think are on the market anymore that will dimple the wood when it dries. So you have to be careful with that when it's real thin. Of course, you can always cut the planks a little thicker, and that takes care of that problem somewhat.
You talked about glues. What about finishes? Is it the same principle? Can you use a variety of finishes like you would on a normal piece of furniture or anything? Shellacs or lacquers or what have you?
Well, the finish can be used any type that is usable on wood. The paint I used on this one is an acrylic paint, but any type of paint that will work on wood works fine. The easiest way is to use a airbrush with an airbrush paint, which this one was not. This one was painted by hand. This one, I'm not sure how I'm going to finish it. Depends on how well the planking repairs become. So I've got a couple that have chipped out on me, I see. But to do this, like I did on the Enterprise, I used a spar varnish on it. The only reason is that will give you a little bit more protection from sunlight. But any finish will work on it. It's just, you have to be careful with the fact that you're working on a thin piece of wood. And but I've mostly, one thing I like to use a lot on the models like this is Minwax oils, because they coat easily, they coat well, and they're easy to repair. Any more questions? Over here.
I'll ask another question since you guys are questioned out. You said that they're doing a ship at the Jefferson Barracks Museum. Do you know who's doing that? What group?
Well, it was the group that I'm trying to locate. It was the Gateway Model Ship Crafters.
Okay.
And the last thing I can find on the club was, I think it was August of 2021. And I used to be a member of the club. And as with everything else, when my mother and I both got sick, I kind of lost track of them. And they had stopped doing meetings publicly. They were doing in basements. And so I'm going to either try to get a hold of Bob, now that I do have an email for him, or I'm going to call the museum, go down to the museum and see if they can give me a lead.
All right. Also, I know you mentioned, you kind of hit on how you get the plans for the ships so you can build them to scale. Let's say I wanted to do, and I have an interest in doing like a 1920s tugboat, a particular one. How would I go about getting plans for that so I can figure out the scale in which to build it from?
Well, I would have to look to find some information, but there are some companies that sell plans, and I don't know how many of them are still in business. But, and I don't know that I have any offhand.
Well, I'll get together with you later
Okay.
on about that. Anybody else?
And all right, well, thank you very much.